Great. Nathan, thank you. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you, Nathan and Adam, for inviting me to speak. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm going to take you back to 2018, where my journey in longevity started. This is me asleep in a lay-by in Norway. And what I was doing a 24-hour bike ride. And on the way up to the beginning of the ride, I read this article about a company called Juvenescence. I'm sure many of you know Juvenescence, but in 2018, this company had just raised $50 million in an area that was called anti-aging and longevity. And the mind was expanded at that point. So fast forward to where we are now. So my organization runs, as you can see here, Longevity.Technology. Do please check us out. We push out daily news all the time on the longevity space. We're just about to 10x our output because we've got some new tools that we're working with. We've got a Decoding Longevity Trends, which is our data product, which launches in September, which is basically an M&A tool for longevity. Over 1,500 companies in there. We've got a DSI project, which I'll be happy to talk to anybody about if you want to speak to me after the event. And we've also jumped in on having our own supplement stack. So where the longevity is now, as an industry, we're all very aware of what's happening in the space. We've got influencers, obviously. Brian Johnson was here last week. We've got GLP-1s in the marketplace. It's a very, very interesting time for all of us. So I'm going to have a lot of data that I'm sharing. If anybody would like this data, please take my QR. It's going to pop up again a little bit later in the slide deck. So let's talk about the marketplace. So this is a chart. This is not our chart, but you can see that obviously people are looking at what this space is going to mean. And the issue is that this data is conflating all sorts of interpretations of what longevity is. Is it supplements? Is it luxury cruises for elders? The space is a little bit of a mess. So as Nathan said, we at Longevity.Technology, we publish annual reports on what's happening in the space. And our next report comes out a week on Tuesday, which is the 2024 report. I'm going to share a little bit of that with you as we go through today. And we analyze the industry across 25 different domains of longevity. And there's going to be a 26th poking up in that bottom left-hand corner, which is going to be biostasis. We weren't really taking biostasis as seriously as obviously the industry is starting to do now, and there's some players coming into the space, so we're going to be making that our 26th domain. And then when you look at the biotech side of what's happening in the space, you can see that there are these 14 subdomains that we analyze. As you can see, there's everything there from xenotherapeutics, which we talked about earlier, down to reproductive longevity. Who is that? Well, replacement is in rejuvenation, okay? So it's all about interpretation, normally, as you know. So, but thank you for your contribution. Okay. All right. So, longevity biotech. We have, as it stands right now, 889 longevity biotechs in our data. Now, that would counter to what some people would interpret as a longevity biotech, and I'm completely open to those conversations. We define it as an organization that's working on an aging disease. So, of course, you've got traditional disease management in there, but we don't count big pharma. So we work with longevity biotech companies specifically on their data. We work with organizations that have got a longevity type of asset, but we don't count big biopharma because obviously they're a big outlier. So the great news, as you can see, when you look across those 1,500 companies, the funding from 2023 to 2024 peaked to 8.26 billion. Which is obviously demonstrating that the market is picking up. It didn't get to the point where we all were in 2021, but of course, as we know, we're in a bit of a biotech winter. And of course, that was a crossover of smaller amount of deals. So you can see that the quantum of the deal size is getting bigger, obviously because the deal quantum itself is actually dropping down slightly. But this is how this spreads across the 25 different domains. So you can see that the discovery platforms are still the outlier. Neuropharma is something that has actually moved further to the left over the last couple of years because, as you all know, there's some interesting work going on in neuropharma. And you can see that obviously when you come down further down here, there are some different therapeutics that are in the long tail there. Great news is that the USA, as nobody would be surprised, is where all the action is. In fact, all the funding of last year, 85% of that was into US companies. And great that we're here in California, because as you can see, California was the state that was actually the highest. That won't surprise any of you, right? But obviously you can see that there's some very interesting things happening in this space. So we all know the problem that we're fixing, okay? Different statistics. I always like to draw a parallel between US defense expenditure and US health expenditure. You can see that obviously we all know the problem that we're leaning into. But the issue that we've all got, when you compare what's happening in our sector and compare it to what's happening in other sectors, we're just not hitting our stride, right? There's just not enough capital coming into the space. So as an industry, we're not articulating the problems and the opportunities as much as we can. But as we all know, really, we're not here yet with some of the therapeutics that we all want to see happening. So if you want those data points, please QR me, or just be patient. A week on Tuesday, the report will be launched. We're going to be launching it at the X Prize, which is happening in New York on that day. Okay, so longevity. So I'm not sure how much time I've got left. Have I got about 10 minutes? Maybe 10 minutes, right? So I'm going to really rattle through this, okay? So this is basically the spaghetti that is the longevity industry. And what we are looking to do, of course, as an industry, we all know the problem we're fixing. We're trying to fix those diseases. And of course, a lot of people are now talking about the health span industry. Some people are getting a bit sniffy about the term longevity. I'm completely vested because my website's called Longevity.Technology, so that ain't changing. But of course, when you look at this industry as it is right now, this is the longevity 1.0 industry. And we obviously want to get to the point where we're moving into this longevity 2.0 industry. I'll talk about 3.0 at the end of my presentation. But what we do is we actually are recutting all of our data to reclassify all of those assets that we've got in our data sets across these 10 levels of longevity. So I'm going to take a very quick canter through these because I don't want to overrun on time. So lifestyle management, we all know what's happening in lifestyle management. It's all about diet, sleep, exercise, alcohol, all of those types of things. But it's changing, right? So we've seen what's happening in the gym space. This is Technogym. I mean, Technogym have gone all in on longevity. They call it healthness. Obviously, they're starting to think about the health span argument. But likewise, we're seeing a lot of M&A activity starting to happen in the space too. And of course, gyms are starting to embrace this. And of course, what you need for that is you need consumer diagnostics. And you need reliable consumer diagnostics that everybody's benchmarking against. I don't buy into this, I'm 47, but I'm 21. We all know that that's the test that they chose to share. We're waiting to see what the other tests are, right? But the reality is that there's some very interesting things happening in the space. AI is coming into the space now, and the biomarkers of aging consortium are doing some great work, and we're hopefully in a position where we'll see some output from that, where this standardization of consumer diagnostics is going to move us into this next sphere of really being benchmarked, so we can get to the point where we've got a solid surrogate endpoint for a lot of the work that's going on in the biotech side. Longevity biohacking, well, of course, this is supplementation. We've jumped in ourselves. We've got our own supplement brand, red light therapy, cryo, all of those types of things. A very big industry in itself. I met with Alex Avaronkov yesterday. He's working with a group called SRW, and he's using his biotech platform to develop GRAS supplementation. So there's an innovation in the supplement space happening as well. Who's been to a longevity clinic? Quite a few of you, yeah. So I've been to 3 longevity clinics, and they've identified 3 things with me from a health perspective, but none of them identified the same thing. Okay, so that's interesting, isn't it? So the reality is that they're popping up all over the place. We're actually going to be launching a longevity clinics directory in a couple of months' time. There's a good thing happening in the space now, which is the industry is trying to self-regulate. And I'm sure some of you, especially being in the Bay Area, have been through the chasm theory, or where markets grow, markets go through their correction point. The longevity clinical industry is going to go through a point of correction over the next few years as we get standards into the industry, standards on diagnostics, standards on intervention, and obviously standards on the clinics themselves. So it's a bit of a free-for-all at the moment. If anybody's been to Dubai recently, I mean, it really is crazy town on the longevity clinical front. So aging disease management, well, this is basically the sick care paradigm that we're all in now. We do count these companies because they are working on aging. But of course, what happens underneath all of this is the companies that are working on aging that are looking to be in a position where you can prevent that aging from happening in the first place. And I can see that Oki's looking at his computer rather than looking at your screen because I've given you a bit of prime time there, Oki. But So the reality is that what's happening here is that these organizations, as Oki will attest to, they're leaning into an existing allowable, they're leaning into an existing code on an insurance claim form. But the interesting thing, of course, is the potential of moving that needle backwards. So if we're in a position where we can prevent those diseases from happening in the first place, that's where we all want to be, right? And of course, there are some companies that are moving into this space. We all know about what's happened with BioAge. They IPO'd. They had to withdraw one of their trials, but they bounce back. So you can see these organizations that are moving into aging disease, and we know what's happened with the GLP-1s and the way that BioAge are working into that agenda. We're starting to see the needle move, okay? And it's very exciting about the fact that these organizations are really moving into a position where they are demonstrating that there's a potential exit route for those investors. Targeted age reversal, well, of course, everybody talks a lot about partial cellular reprogramming. It's a very exciting area. It's still very, very new, as we all know. But there's an organization that I'm sure many of you know, Life Biosciences. They were one of the first companies that I spoke to when I was just coming back from Norway and starting to do some exploratory work on what was happening in the space. They've been at this a long time. This is an old article on our site. They're just about to go into phase 2 trials using partial cellular reprogramming on the eye, which of course is very exciting. The eye is a secondary organ. It's isolated from the rest of the body, so it's easy to work in that particular space. And as many of you will know, Turn Bio as well, very exciting company. They're signing deals. So we're starting to see the commercialization pathways. We've seen Fauna Bio on the previous slide. They've got a big deal with Lilly. And really what's happening is that we're now starting to move into humans with partial cellular reprogramming, which of course is incredibly exciting. So what I've just shown you effectively is the longevity industry 2.0, which is what a lot of us are moving into. And when I started this organization over 7 years ago, I was looking into an industry that hadn't really formed, hadn't really existed in its current form before. But I'm not a forefather of this industry. There's people, as we all know, like Aubrey, have been in it for a very, very long time. But I'm now starting to lift my head and start thinking about where the industry is going to go in this next phase. Because to me, longevity 2.0 is just going to happen. It's going to happen eventually. We're going to see what happens in terms of the capital coming into the space and the exits that come into the space. But the reality is that we're going to see these therapeutics within humans. Eric Verdin reckons 5 years. Other people will say 10 years. We're actually going to be in a position where we apply our data and we're going to be able to give an empirical answer to how quickly it's going to happen, because we're running a lot of simulated AI models over the top of that. But when you think about what the longevity 3.0 industry might look like, again, people like to use the word health span because they don't like the word longevity. People don't really like to talk about immortality, but the reality is that there are some very interesting things happening in the space that could lead us to the point where we have a disease-free, potentially hyper-longevity, maybe endless existence. The thing that I'm quite interested in is what's starting in a very, very early stage to happen in the digital space. Obviously, we've got things that are happening with quantum. There's a company which I was just talking about earlier called Subsense AI, and they're using 2 types of nanobots that are going into the brain. They're going through the nasal cavity, and they are read and write for the brain. And this organization actually is trying to get to the point where, they are doing Parkinson's, they're doing Alzheimer's, they're doing all of those things. But I asked the CEO, why did you get investment and who invested? And of course, it was Silicon Valley investors that wanted to see what they're working on in the future, which frankly is going to be things like telepathy. And really, in terms of where this is going, I feel that really you look at systemic aging reversal, obviously xenotherapeutics, mitochondrial transplant, cellular reprogramming across the whole body. This is something that we could be leaning into. You can see a couple of companies here. I don't know if any of you know Matrix Bio. They're based in California, got some very exciting tech. Company out of Israel doing the same thing, effectively repurposing all of the mitochondria in the body. And then, of course, if this doesn't happen, then you've got the concept of what's happening. And we heard from Omri today, which was a fascinating presentation about where this can go in terms of organ preservation, which, of course, is the sensible thing as we stand in the marketplace as it stands right now. But the potential, of course, of moving into biostasis, which I feel is one of those industries that's really starting to take off now. So Alex Zavaronkov, I was literally speaking with him yesterday and saying, like, how serious do you think head transplants truly are? And his concept was basically that they are very serious, and they are very, potential is very big. There's a Chinese doctor who's doing spinal cord transplant now in China, and he's actually doing it on humans in China. And of course, when you look at what Omri's doing with the potential of a surrogate body, there's some very exciting things that we can be leaning into as an industry when we move into this 3.0 space. And then the final piece, of course, is the concept of maybe being in the future, being able to retire to the cloud or not have the burden of these corporal bodies that we have, which I think is a very interesting and exciting opportunity for us as humans. And of course, Laura Deming, who's going to be speaking at our conference in London, she got 48 million for Cradle, and her concept is to be in a position where you can do biostasis for space travel. There's a very interesting crossover with the space industry now happening with longevity, which I'm sure some of you will be aware of. But the future that we're leaning into, of course, is very, very exciting. The technologies that are happening, I mean, everybody's using AI now. I mean, AI is not a threat. AI is an enhancement for all of us. And when you think about what the future looks like in terms of the exponentiality of where we're all moving into now as humans, I do completely echo Brian Johnson's "Don't Die." I mean, this future is way, way too exciting for us to die. We're all part of this incredible industry. And yeah, I think I'm probably out of time. So there are my contact details. If you'd like to talk to me at any time about our data product or our investment DAO, it'd be a pleasure. I'm staying in San Francisco until Thursday, and thank you so much for your attention. You've been a great audience. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so we have time for one or two questions. Any questions from the crowd?
Awesome talk, and it's really good to see Longevity Technology having an awesome big picture over the field. And I guess the fields, right? Because you've said you're very excited about biostasis, and obviously more and more people are getting excited about biostasis. I guess one of them is Laura Deming raising more for the biostasis startup, 48 million, than for the replacement biology H1 VCs, like just 35 mil. Yep. So I guess, but in terms of H1 VC and in terms of replacement biology startups and so on, it's clear what's happening in the regulatory side, right? If you can prove something works and it's safe, you will get approval. How do you see the regulatory side on the biostasis? Do you think it's going to be more complicated? Is it going to be geography by geography? How do you see it going forward?
Well, it's going to go you're not going to go from zero to a human, right? As you know, I mean, Emil, I saw him around earlier. He'll be a much better answer to this. But it's going to go incrementally. We saw what Omri was saying about how he's moving his technology to a certain point, and then of course that will be a regulatory pathway as the technology starts to be more proven as you go forward. So I would say that biostasis is going to be really, first of all, an extension of the transplant market, just so that you can obviously transport organs for more than 3 days, and you can obviously be in a position where you can resuscitate them and they're still going to be active. So once you've got past that break point, you then move on to the next one, which is, okay, well, I say, well, maybe what we're in a position of doing is doing larger mammals, right? So if you're in a position where you might take a rat, or you maybe even go into a small primate or a larger primate, you'll just start to see this incrementally going forward. And we were just talking earlier about Montana. The announcement that's been made by Montana that the right to try is something that's maybe going to be available in Montana. Things are changing, right? And you saw the chart with the burden to society. We all know that. So I think that really what people are going to say, moving it back to biostasis, they're going to say, well, not enough organs coming into the supply line. The ones that we've got, can't be stored long enough. So that would be, to me, the biostasis argument. That would just move quite quickly into that, and then we'll move on as an industry going forward from there. But obviously, when you've got people like Laura talking to Silicon Valley investors, talking about space travel, that's the type of thing that people love anyway, right? And of course, that's why this is such an amazing place in California where all these things are happening.
Okay, thank you. Let's give another round of applause for Phil
Thanks,
Newman.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.